Good evening. I am pleased to be back with you on another episode of Anupali. Over the past weeks, I have heard from many of you who reached out to say you missed the program and look forward to its return. Now we're back. Well, we are back with new and interesting topics focused on the work this government is doing to improve lives, create opportunities for growth, and set this country on the right path to development. Just this past week, you saw the hard work of this government at play once again. We officially commissioned 3 newly rehabilitated primary schools in Mount John, in Delis, and Marigot. Our children in these communities can now access learning in safer, healthier spaces designed to enhance their educational experiences and increase their chances for success. Soon, we'll hand over the Granby Primary School, which will be renamed the Edward Regis Primary School. Once again, we extend our deepest appreciation and gratitude to the Canadian government for financing these projects and to the Caribbean Development Bank for its oversight and guidance. The reconstruction of these schools is part of our resilience building efforts in the post-Hurricane Maria period. In fact, since the hurricane, which impacted over 90% of our physical structures, we have sought to rebuild in keeping with more stringent construction codes. Dominica, we know, is vulnerable to a wide range of natural hazards. The most common are tropical storms and hurricanes. However, the island is vulnerable to all the disasters caused by floods, volcanoes, landslides, rock slides, and tsunamis. The damage to the built environment consisting of buildings and other structures, and the impact on social and economic life can be significant. In the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, the government conducted an assessment of loss, damage, and the cost of the recovery, taking into consideration the need to build back better and ensure resilience against future events. We have reviewed the existing building codes and approved the building regulations of 2022 to guide our reconstruction efforts. On today's program, I have invited Honorable Dr. Vince Henderson, our Minister for Planning, Economic Development, Climate Resilience, Sustainable Development, and Renewable Energy, and Ms. Naomi Doroville, the Acting Chief Physical Planner, to provide us with some detail of these policies. I want to, first of all, welcome Dr. Henderson, our Minister, to the program. Vince, welcome.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It's a pleasure to be on.
Welcome. Ms. Doroville, welcome. It's the first time on the party, and welcome. And I'm happy to see such a young person heading such a very important institution.
Thank you.
So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Now, let us get straight into the discussion there. Honourable Minister, how do we define the building codes and regulations of 2022 recently approved by the Cabinet?
Well, Prime Minister, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. We recently approved the new building regulations 2022. The code really, it sets out the standard for construction. So anything in the built environment, as my good friend, the Chief Physical Planner likes to say, anything in the built environment, anything that is defined as a development is in fact, would fall under what are considered the standards for construction. The regulation is really the enforcement part of it. So the regulation speaks to how it gives the details of what needs to be done and how it's to be monitored, supervised, and of course, enforced. So essentially what it does is to give us the guidelines, the instruction manual, as it were, as to what should be done to ensure that people can adhere to the standards of construction.
Now, the follow-up question to this, though, how did the devastation of Hurricane Maria influence the revision and development of the new guidelines?
Well, post-Hurricane Maria, there were a number of consultations. There were discussions with the Builders Association, the Architects, the Engineers Association. We had the input of the OECS Commission. We were fortunate to have the support of the UN, UNDP in particular, Engineers Without Border, who were on island assisting us in seeking to rebuild. of course, the physical plan division played a very important role. So we were able to evaluate the impact and to look for the lessons to be learned, and those fed into what we now have as the new building regulations, because we really took the time and to have broad discussions. There was various cross-sections of the society, private sector, homeowners, and to really hear from them and to understand and to sort of investigate on site, because it was fresh. You know, the impact was there. And out of that came about some guidelines. And emanating out of that are the regulations.
Now, Ms. Doraville, what were some of the lessons learned following the assessment of damage and loss in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria? And what are some of the main areas we need to improve on?
Okay, thank you for that question, Honorable Prime Minister. One of the key lessons, a few of the key lessons that we learned during that is that the implementation of the code itself, we had some flaws in there, or some gaps. So we had some lack of compliance to the standards, the location of certain buildings, because if you are in an area that is exposed to hazards, then the likelihood of impact is increased and your likelihood of damage is increased. So we saw that the locations of certain buildings or the built environment infrastructure played a part in that. We also saw the lack of the quality of materials that we use for construction. We had some gaps in that as well. So those are the key areas that we recognized that we needed to have some stringent enforcement play a role.
Minister, who specifically does the building code and regulations target?
Okay, well, yeah, before I respond directly to this, let me just put a little background. So there is already the Physical Planning Act, and out of that, there are requirements for planning permission for any development, which sometimes can be debatable, but development is defined in the Act. Now, the code really, as we said, it is sort of strengthening the Act by outlining guidelines that are, some of which were already in existence. But because of what we learned, the lessons learned from Hurricane Maria, and the debates that have been going on over years, even prior to Hurricane Maria, it was felt the need to have more stringent regulations for different types of construction. So what the code does is that it classifies developments. So we have sections 1 to 17 that speaks to to different types of buildings. So for example, there are buildings over 2,500 square feet, commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, residential, well, apartment type construction, industrial buildings, because again, you may have hazards that are part of the operations, and therefore the requirements are slightly different. Institutional buildings, hospitals, health centers, schools. So there are regulations that deal to that. Buildings on slopey areas, exceeding 30, I think a 30-degree slope. Again, they will require a certain type of building and certain type of regulations to be observed. There are also smaller buildings, those that fall below 2,500 square feet and are not commercial buildings, industrial, institutional, or multifamily buildings or multi-story buildings that would again have to comply for different sets of requirements. And it's important to make the distinction, because those 2005 and over, and institutional, commercial, industrial, and institutional, they have to meet more stringent requirements. So for example, there is a need for approval by an architect or an engineer for the plans. So you cannot submit a plan for those types of buildings without the approval of an architect, or without a submission from an architect or an engineer. But those that are smaller, there are requirements for the type of materials used, basic requirements, where the beams are placed, where the columns are placed, the size and strength and all of those things that have already been around for quite a while, but because of the lessons learned, we have improved them. So it's an improvement over what existed. Yeah.
Now, Ms. Doraville, can you outline for our listeners and viewers the buildings or structures to which the code applies. And I know Ambassador Henderson has referenced them, but from a technical standpoint, can you give us a little more detail on this, though?
Okay, so any structure that is over 2,500 square foot, any structure that is more than 2 stories tall, any structure that is for commercial purposes, industrial purposes, institutional purposes, engineering works, so a city fence wall would have to go through the rigors of the code as well.
No, and you talk about 2,000 square feet, above 2,000 square feet, so 2,500, sorry, 2,500 square feet. Yeah. Is it for us to deduce that there are exemptions?
well, that's...
Are there exemptions? So anything, is there anything below? No?
Well, the code applies to everything in the built environment. Okay. As Ambassador Henderson rightly stated, sections 1 to 17 speak specifically to that class of buildings. So the more than 2,500, okay. The more than 2 stories high. Now, section 18 of the code, which refers to small structures, is also what we call the building guidelines. And what we did after Hurricane Maria is we also had the Dominica standards for housing. The guidelines to the Dominica housing standards. That document is directly taken from the building guidelines. So that is to help the everyday homeowner with how to repair their roof, what are the standards for your roof, what are the standards for your foundation, how wide your kitchen windows need to be for ventilation. And so those aspects are detailed in the section 18. So technically, all structures fall under the premise of the code, but it's just the
different categorizations.
Right. Treated differently.
Yeah, right. Different categorizations depending on what you're building and so forth. So you're not necessarily facilitating people, but giving them proper guidelines as to how they go about it. I want to. Now, I mean, is there a need, though, for people doing repairs or rehabilitation of existing structures to comply with the requirements?
Yes, there is. There is, because we want to ensure that the repairs are done to the codes. Sometimes we, like we saw after Maria, there is a certain period where there is need to put a roof, and whatever material we need to secure ourselves for emergency purposes. But in the long term, there is a need for repairs to be done according to the code so that your structure is a safe structure. The code does make stipulations that if the repairs is less than 10% of your building structure, if it's not cutting into a wall or if it's not cutting into a beam, then you do not have to go through some of the stringent application and process of the physical planning division. You may require a site visit. An inspector may come to evaluate whether it is you need to actually go through that whole application process, or if it is something that can be done at the homeowner level using the guidelines as your base document.
Excellent. Now, does the building code mandate the use of specific approved materials and methods, or are these left to the individual?
Yes, it does as well. So we do have specifications for steel. We have specifications for galvanized, corrugated galvanized. For your roofing, we have specifications for your concrete. I don't want to get too technical. I'm fighting to not get too technical, but your PSI of your concrete. So there are specifications as to which materials and even the method of using these materials. And it is important to know that because the materials are the source of your building. So if the material is flawed, then even if you use proper methods, it can compromise your structure. So it's good to know what the specifications of the code are, and to know that whether your materials fall within those specifications. Now, in the event that the code does not speak to a particular material that you intend to use, you are allowed, or there are alternates that you can provide the specification for, and it will be reviewed by the architects or the engineers to ensure that it would still hold to the essence of the code, which is to protect your structure and make sure that you have a safe structure.
Okay. Now, people are asking about safety measures. You pass by a construction site, and the placement will be fenced from pedestrians or walkabout, or people walking by, or even construction workers. What about the safety measures, though, and considerations during construction? Are these things accounted for?
Yes, they are. And health and safety is a key aspect of construction, because it's persons, it's human beings doing the construction. So you want to ensure that the persons doing your construction are safe. You also want to ensure it is not happening in isolation. By that I mean, we have the built environment, which is a social space. We have persons walking about. If a construction is happening in Roseau, you may have vehicles passing, you will have pedestrians. So you want to make sure that anybody around that site is safe, as well as the construction workers who are the ones undertaking the development.
Now, the building code is also intended to facilitate safe and appropriate designs for small structures by non-professional architects and designers and so on. Can you give all listeners some information on this?
So again, we will refer back to the Guide to the Dominica Housing Standards, where this document was so envisioned that it was tailored to the homeowner and your cousin that is a builder on the side. So it gives them all the technical guidelines that they would require to undertake small repairs to a small structure. So there's illustrations in it as well. Maybe at some point you can visit the physical planning website. There's the document online, so you can have a view of it, that it is user friendly, that anyone, a homeowner, a housewife, or house husband can open the document. Can open the document. If their roof needs repaired, they can see how it is spacing. If somebody is doing something, and one of the critical things we had a lot of homeowners interested in this document, because sometimes contractors are doing something for them and they are not aware if they are doing it properly. So them, with the aid of the guideline, can watch the document, go through the illustration, go through the point form detail, and say, but it says it's supposed to be this thing. I'm seeing you doing X, Y, Z. Are you sure this is so? It's to empower us by way of education on the code in the simplest form possible.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Minister, why is it important that homeowners, builders, and contractors observe and adhere to the standards in the code? So?
Well, Prime Minister, first of all, an investment in a building, in a house, is one of the single largest investment that any one of us will make, and that's for a lifetime. And therefore, it's important that the state play a role to ensure that we can help the individuals to protect that investment. So I think we start on that basis, but then we go on to see what happens when there's a natural disaster and the impact that is wrought on families. And of course, the state has a very important role to play, a responsibility to help to respond and to deal with the impact. So it is really important to help to protect the homeowners. Again, it is important that the entire process of building goes through. Sometimes you have to take a mortgage, you must go to the bank has to see planning approval, which is again another layer of protection. So it is protecting the homeowner. It is ensuring that the builders themselves can be assisted, because sometimes the tendency to cut corners, that happens. And with a development control officer making the rounds, monitoring, supervising, making observations, and then sometimes being more facilitating rather than policing, because they could see something being done wrongly and can bring it to the attention of the contractor. So I think it is really important to protect the interests of the homeowners. It is important to protect the interests of the builders and the contractors too, because at some point you will see when we move to, when we speak more to the impact of the code, there are also protections that builders may technically get from the enforcement of the code. And of course, it is for public benefit. It is a public good, because if you build a dangerous house that could damage mine, then I get impacted. So I think for overall public protection, it's important that we have those codes.
And how does it fit, in the government's general thrust to build resilience across sectors and mitigate against the impact of natural disasters?
Excellent. So it does two things. We build better structures, structures that can withstand the impact of natural hazards. And of course, as we've said, not just hurricanes and storms, but earthquakes. We're looking at earthquakes, landslides, and so forth, floods. So it will help. The designs are meant to do that, both for those that fall under the categories in sections 1 to 17, that is the bigger structures, and the smaller structures. So the guidelines help as well to make them more resilient. But the second thing is that we're also helping to achieve sustainable development, so that the design of the houses to ensure the flow of natural air, lighting, all of those things, these are all part of what we're seeking to achieve. And safety. So coming back to, we talk about natural hazards, but what about fires? There's a whole section on fire protection and how to build exits, to have an extra door where in the event of a fire escapes, to ensure that, sorry?
The passageway,
the passageway, the type of materials and the regulations governing what kind of materials can be used, how they should be used to prevent fires. So all of these things are being done to help to create greater resilience, and not only from, as I said, natural hazards, but from man-made events. And I think it is important that people observe the regulations, because the way we're approaching this is not to police people or prevent people from doing stuff. We're trying to protect the public, and this is our main objective.
Now, are the building codes only concerned about the impact of hurricanes, or other disasters were taken into consideration, like earthquakes and so forth?
Yes. So all throughout the code, we address a number of hazards. We focus on wind loading for hurricanes. We dealt with heights of buildings for floods. We dealt with seismic buildings, so that we deal with your seismic hazards, sorry. So all the hazards, probably with the exception of volcanic, are considered all throughout the code, and so that is where the designs for your enforcement, your enforcement of your steel and so on comes into play. The type of gauging galvanized you use, the spacing between your rafters. For seismic structures, the distance between your columns, the height of your beams, the depths of your beams, the widths of your beams, all those things form part of the code, intricately designed into the code to cover the different hazards that may occur in Dominica.
Now, some people are saying to me that the division, the planning division, physical planning division, normally harasses the little man, and then the big man is allowed to do what he wants.
Why would they say that
well,
to you?
No, I don't know. I'm telling you what they're saying to me. So you there now, you're the boss. I am telling you, I mean, how does physical planning enforce the provisions and requirements of the building codes?
Okay, so we have two phases, we have multiple layers which we use. The first one would be approval. So your proposal for building or development would need to come through the physical planning division. While it is at physical planning division, we review your proposal to ensure that the structure that is being proposed is designed according to the code. So that's the first layer. So once you receive approval from physical planning division, then your structure has been designed to code. The second layer would be monitoring and enforcement. That is where the land use officers and the development control officers of the division come into play, where periodically during construction they would visit your site to ensure that your contractor is doing as stated in your proposal. Now, granted, we may get an approval in 2020, and for circumstances beyond our control, we build in 2025, and there may need to be some adjustment. Those things are also taken into consideration. So you can, depending on the scale, you can either have an amendment to your approved plan. If it's something minor, the development control officer can assist you in showing you how to ensure that your building still is to code while doing your construction.
Now, what are the consequences, though, of not adhering to the standards? Vince, you.
Well, before I wanted to add something else that was said in terms of the process, because you said in terms of enforcement, and I think something that's important to mention is that with the new building codes, we have essentially for the bigger buildings, those we spoke about, those 2,500 and above, and also commercial, industrial, and so forth, buildings, residential, multi-family apartments, we have included a certificate of occupancy. I think that is important to note. Certificate of completion. So you need to, so for example, the developer must get to that stage, go through inspection, and it will require the engagement of an engineer to supervise and to report and to indicate that this has been completed. This is important, especially for commercial buildings and industrial buildings, for safety. So you have to look at fire safety, you know, and look at the hazards and anything that needs to be improved. So that is important, and it's also a good thing for the contractor. If there's a certificate of completion or occupancy, you can't say the man didn't finish the building and don't pay him. So it's essentially, it is something that is being added. That is a new component that is being done. That is something that has never been done before. But in terms of how do we deal with consequences, well, there are a number of things that can be done. And I have had to, myself, been updated by the chief physical planner on a number of cases where we may have imposed a stop order. So if someone is building and they have not gotten permission, or they're going beyond what was approved, then it means that the physical planning division can impose a stop order on the construction. That means you stop. You don't do anything until you can correct what was highlighted. Then there is also an opportunity for an appeal. So the homeowner, the builder, somebody who has standing, who has a reason to take action, can appeal, and then it goes through another process. What we prefer to do is, if there is a visit to your property and there are a number of things raised, let's work on them together. Let's get a solution. And I have sat with the chief physical planner and sometimes with the officers, and they're really trying their best to help people to resolve the problems, because we're not trying to pull this just for the sake of it. We want buildings to be safe in the event that we have another Maria, God forbid, that we could see less damage done to property. So that is essentially how it goes. And the worst case scenario is if you've done an illegal construction, you could really demolish it, right, Ms. Dorival? Which is the real extreme.
Ultimately.
Yeah, that could happen. Hardly ever happens.
No. Ms. Dorival, clearly the physical planning division can't do it alone. It's going to require the collaboration of other entities. Are you working with other entities, the banks, and which other entities are you collaborating with?
Well, we work with the bank, the financing institutions, especially after Maria, have really come on board and ensured that persons coming for loans for construction have approval from physical planning. We have also seen some participation with the utility companies, but we need to work on that a little bit more, because one of the issues we have is we are governed by two different acts. So the utilities company is governed by one act, the physical planning division is governed by another act. So we are working on those things. But it stands to say that, like you rightly said, it is a collaboration. And if the ultimate objective is for us to have a safe and secure built environment, then there is need for us to work together and seek each other out to ensure that that happens.
I'll ask you a question. How can we get the government to ensure that it itself gets approval from the physical planner? Because sometimes the projects which commence without planning's approval, and this is not, the cabinet is very clear on this, that we must get planning approval before we commence projects. How do we get the ministries concerned to ensure this happens? You can tell me.
I believe it's more communication. I think communication is the best approach. Clear communication as to what needs to be done. For example, if Ministry of Education has an important project that needs to happen, at least we can have some preliminary discussions about it so that we know, yes, the plans need to think, but these are what you should consider. So we can give you a heads up as to what needs to be considered so that when you send in your plans to planning, it's an easy process to...
Okay. Communication. Okay. Now, Minister, since 2018, we have had technical support from key agencies in developing this guidance. Can you speak to the collaboration and partnerships we've had in putting this together?
Yeah, well, we had quite a bit of support from the OECS. So OECS has the harmonized building codes that was part of the discussion, the lessons learned after Hurricane Maria. And we've brought on board the local architect and engineer association, so they also played a very important role. The Builders and Contractors Association also contributed to the process. And then again, there was quite a bit of support, especially for the preparation of the guidelines for the smaller buildings, that we had the participation of a number of partners. And as I said earlier, the UN agencies gave some support, and the Engineers Without Borders, and a number of other, well, homeowners as well, just people who were interested, who wanted to be part of the process. And they got involved, and we collaborated, and what we have now is the final outcome. So what is now codified in the regulation is the outcome of that collaboration with all these partners.
Excellent. Yeah. Now, Minister, since the passage of Hurricane Maria, this government has transformed the physical landscape of Dominica with the construction of a number of housing complexes, health facilities, schools, etc. Have we in fact met some of our objectives to build more resilient structures? And also, have we been building back better and stronger?
Definitely, definitely. And it's exciting when you look at the length and breadth of the island and you see that we're getting there. Because just starting with the housing stock, we're seeing more resilient houses being built. It seems even concrete roof is a preferred option for most people with its own, challenges. And even those who have not gone that route have built stronger timber roofs. And so what we're seeing is that government itself is leading the way, leading that process, because all of the houses that the government has built clearly are more resilient structures. We have seen that through the apartment buildings, with the single units. We have gone throughout the country, currently even in the Kalinago territory, construction being funded by the EU. We're seeing the World Bank program. All of this are part of building more resilient housing stock. So clearly, we are getting there with the publicly funded houses, and we're seeing privately funded houses because of the lessons learned from Maria. Now with the regulations in place, we expect to see even more. So we are seeing that health centers, the facilities, the initiative with PAHO and the UK with the smart health centers and wellness centers, and also government finance health and wellness centers are clearly more resilient than they ever were. And when I talk about resilience, I'm not only talking about the design that can withstand the impact of a natural hazard, but also the actual support system. So for example, at the Grand Bay Health Center, there are water tanks, solar power, a generator in the basement. We see now in the Marigot Hospital, state-of-the-art facility, Again, you have backup power. You have systems that are working. You have a design that is suitable to withstand the impact of a major meteorohydrological event. So we're seeing those things as part of government's effort to build resilience. So clearly, the schools, we just saw the opening of 3 schools. And I'm waiting for mine in Granby, by the way, PM, Minister of Finance. But we're seeing that these schools are now built to withstand the impact. But the most important thing, when you look at the design, the materials that are used, and the work that have been done, and especially with the water tanks, the solar power, the backup generators on facility, there are a number of things that are being done to help us to achieve our goal of being the first climate resilient nation in the world. And that goes great credit to you, Prime Minister, as Minister of Finance especially, and to ensure that we can work with our partners very closely. We've seen the support of our development partners towards that goal, and CREED is playing a very, very important role in ensuring that we coordinate all of this. And of course, our roads. Our roads, which are also a significant part of building resilience through communication and connectivity between communities.
Sure, excellent. Now, Minister, what is the ministry's plan, though, to build awareness among citizens about the importance of these new guidelines and regulations?
Well, we're getting ready to hit the road. We are collaborating with the Caribbean Development Bank. We are working on a plan to go out to the stakeholders. We will be doing our own bit locally with the support of the Physical Planning Division, myself and the ministry. We will be doing our own media presentation. But what we think is most important is to have greater awareness with the stakeholders. So the builders, the contractors, and so the associations in particular, they need to know their roles and what are the provisions that are in there. Although they participated in putting it together, but now that it's been approved, we need to go out to them in a very organized way and to ensure that we can have the experts on board so that they can help in explaining what exactly are the requirements under the new regulations.
Excellent. Now, Minister, your ministry is concerned with building resilience across various sectors. Apart from our progress with the building code, what are some of the other areas we are pursuing to advance our climate resilience agenda?
Well, climate resilience really connects every facet of our lives, and it's multifaceted, multidimensional, and we've seen a lot of work being done in terms of telecommunications, for example. So the ministry responsible for telecommunications, your ministry, has done its part in seeking to work with the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, and other partners to ensure that we can build our own telecommunications backbone that will help us to connect and communicate in the event of a major event. So that is being done. In energy, there's a lot of work being done in advancing our efforts with geothermal, which will help us to build resilience, but not only by building a power plant that is resilient, but by enhancing our transmission system, the lines through which our power are brought to our home. Those lines will be rebuilt. We are now in the process of developing a new transmission system from Roosevelt Valley to Focole and Focole to Sugarloaf in Portsmouth. So that will help us to bring that entire area connected with a more robust system, so that if we get hit by a hurricane, we will not suffer what we suffered after the passage of Hurricane Maria. In health, we are seeing better systems at the community level with the new health and wellness centers and the resilience that are factored into them. We are seeing that from the health point of view, we're doing more. We have a pilot program on parametric insurance for homeowners, which is being piloted. CREED is playing a very important role in that process. We hope to see that expanded so that homes, smaller homes and homeowners, farmers, fishermen can have some insurance system that will help them in the event that we suffer a major event. And as I mentioned earlier, roads are very important. So the DVRP, the road that's been on the East Coast, that would become a major component of ensuring connectivity to the East Coast of Dominica. once it's completed. And in the south, we have the road from Loop Bear to Bagatelle, which we hope to see work commence in the coming months. So that will also help us to build more resilience in connecting communities, so that in the event of there's a need to evacuate, we know we can have access, and we can provide support to those communities in the event of a major hit. I know also that we're having some conversations by ministry with the Fire and Ambulance Service Department, with the Ministry of Justice, to ensure that our ambulances are modern equipped ambulances throughout all the health districts where there are ambulance services. So to ensure that we have special paramedic trainings, EMT trainings, so that those attendants, those workers on the ambulances can help to provide support. So all of this is part of our overall plan, evacuation that needs to be done. Discussions going on with Ministry of Works to consider alternative routes, so that we ensure that the country is not locked up in the event of a major event. So there are a number of things that we're doing. Our role is collaboration, and we're working with the respective ministries to see how we can collaborate and to ensure that we can meet our targets on our national climate resilience plan, and to ensure that our Agenda 2030 is achieved as we seek to build resilience.
There's a lot happening. We need a few hours for that to give details on this. You know, a lot of very important things happening within the government system. Now, Ms. Dorival, any final words to our viewers, listeners?
What I would like to say is that the measures put in place by the code and the physical planning division, they are for your own protection. Do not see it as a hindrance. Do not see physical planning as an obstacle, but more a facilitator to ensure that your future is much more secure. That's it, really.
You know, I must say it again. I'm very comforted to see such a young person, you know, leading such a very important and powerful institution in the country, and I think this is a testimony to the empowerment of young people across the length and breadth of the public sector, and so young people, you go to school, you do well, you're diligent, you'll be recognized, you know. So I really want to commend you, and I wish you all the best, and whatever support we can give you to ensure that your stewardship of the division is successful, and the ministry is at your disposal. Okay. Now, Vince, I'll ask a couple of questions quickly on Granby. I know there are a couple of things happening there. I want us to, you know, tell us about the housing there, and also we're spending quite a bit of money on the Makaton and Mopo roads. So these are two highly spoken roads in Granby. You know, if farmers don't talk about these two roads, they haven't spoken to you at all in the farm roads in Granby.
Yeah. Well, I will start with the roads because I knew about the roads since when Piero was there and I was Minister for Agriculture. But we are making progress. I'm very, very happy, very encouraged by the support that we're getting. We have already completed the entrance, so the section leading to the intersection where the two roads meet, that has been completed with our own local contractors. We got that done. The big portion that is being done, of $1.5 million from the EU funds, that is being done by Public Works. We have had some delays, admittedly, but we met on site on Monday, and there's a plan to speed up. We may have some delays, but we will catch up eventually, and I'm happy to see that the road will really assist several farmers along that way, especially Makato side. On the Mopo side, we're continuing to do some improvements where we can, to ensure that we can address the worst areas so that farmers can have better access to their farms. So work is ongoing, and we're very happy about that. In terms of the housing development, we have been providing support to several families, especially to complete houses that were damaged, you know, from Hurricane Maria, and efforts were on the way. So these were constructions that started, and we're completing them. So we are doing our own support, direct support to families, and again, with the approval of recent assistance we received, we've been able to execute that. The big project, though, that we're looking forward to is the center housing development, which will house some of the residents of Dubig who already actually residing in that area, but lost their houses after the passage of Hurricane Maria. But the residents of Grand Bay will benefit directly. So work has started. Some contractors have been on the ground and moving on. The site has been prepared, and we see that some work have started. We're really looking forward to that project, because it is not only housing. Again, in keeping with resilience, resilient houses, but a resilient community, because we'll be building other supporting facilities, you know, especially government buildings, the fire and ambulance services. We will be improving a number of facilities. The community
center as well.
The community center, well, even the church.
The church.
And we will ensure that there's a sustainable community that is also resilient. So that project will become a flagship project in terms of sustainability and resilience in that community, and we're looking forward to seeing that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Honorable Henderson, Dr. Henderson, for your time and your efforts there for explaining to us the new building codes. I think that's in the right direction. Seeking to protect people, lives, and property is a fundamental responsibility of government. And I hope that all of us recognize that this is not an imposition on us. It's really protecting us and protecting our investments. The last thing you want to do is to go to the bank and take $400,000, and it's not built properly. You cannot stay in it because it's not safe, and you have to pay the bank $400,000. You know, so let us understand that we're doing it for our own safety and our own protection, and of course some safeguarding our investments that we're all making to improve our lives and improve the lives of our family and the community. And this is why I believe the government itself must adhere to the codes, you know, and every permanent secretary must understand, and the chief technical officer, it is your responsibility to ensure that before project commence, that you have in your hand, not somebody telling you, you have in your hand the approval from planning. Because planning is both in an advisory capacity to the government and also a regulatory capacity, and we have an opportunity to use them in the advisory capacity to guide us in the preparation of these projects and submission to planning. So it's very important, because government is building for the public use. If you're going to build a school, we need to ensure that it is safe and can protect our children. I want to thank again you for being here with us, the listeners and viewers. I know you missed us for a couple weekends. You know, things happen, and we're back, and I'm happy to be back with you. Let us go forth and serve our God and our country. Let us be positive. You know, we have a choice to make. We can be constructive or we can be destructive. And we all want our country to be in a particular position, but the question is, what contribution am I making to get to that point? We all can say, well, Dominica should be there, Dominica should have this, Dominica should do this. But what am I doing in a small way to make this a reality? This is our country. For many of us, for most of us, this is the only place we can call home. We'll ever call home, and therefore we have to ensure that we work diligently to build a prosperous Dominica, build a dynamic Dominica. There are a number of positive things happening, notwithstanding the challenges. We still have COVID around. We still have the impact of COVID. I know that there are no restrictions on our ability to move about and to be entertained and entertain others, etc. But let us be mindful that we have to follow some of the basic guidelines that are there. Wearing our mask, respiratory etiquette, and also washing our hands regularly, sanitizing regularly. Those things can help reduce the spread. The school, we have to ensure that our children don't get infected so they can't go to school. So let us play our part. Because the last thing you want is to have an overriding of cases, and then we have to go back to whence we came. And I really don't want to go back to restrictions. You know, we've had enough of those things, and you know, let us not force ourselves to go back to these restrictions. We're moving forward. You know, things are looking up, and let us play our part to keep them moving up, and so that we all can benefit from this. And please let us understand this. So I want to thank all of you again. There are a number of things happening. The International Airport project is ongoing, and of course at some point we'll give an update on where we are. We have schools under construction. The grammar school, that's an interest to so many people. Work has started. Certainly it will be a wonderful edifice and a very conducive place for learning for students. The dozens and dozens and dozens of homes being constructed across Dominica. In the Carnago territory, in Marigot, in Wesley, all over Dominica, homes are being built to the benefit of so many families. And as we've said, if we have one less vulnerable family, that's an achievement, and so far we have been able to house so many families, and we're pressing on. The intention of the government is not to stop until every single family in Dominica is in a comfortable, safe home. And it's a costly exercise. I think people don't spend time with their calculators, their physical and mental calculators, doing the maths of how much it's costing the government to build those infrastructure. And especially in a difficult time with COVID and revenues dropped. We have not gotten back to the 2019 revenues yet. We're making progress towards that, toward the pre-pandemic revenue levels, but we're not quite there yet. And so that's why it's so important for us to manage our COVID numbers and not divert resources to COVID management as we did in such a dramatic way over the last 2 years. We're not saying that we should not spend the money, because we have always maintained to you that saving lives was our priority. And then this government went all out to provide the resources to protect lives during this pandemic period. So thank you very much. Let us work diligently. This is our country, as I said. Wherever we're working, whatever job we're doing, let's do it diligently. God bless you, and God bless your families, and God bless our country, Dominica. Thank you very much. Good night.